Well, we've been talking about it all morning, the legal battle between the state of Texas and the federal government. Now far from over, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is set to decide if Texas police have the right to arrest people suspected of entering the country illegally. Texas is saying the state has the right to defend its border. And joining us with more insight on law enforcement and how they're approaching this law, let's go ahead and bring in Terrell County Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland. Sheriff, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you all for having me back.
Of course. Thanks so much for being with us. And as we've been saying, there's so much back and forth with this bill. Is your department still trying to figure out how the county would enforce the law should it go into effect, especially since you're in a more rural part of the state of Texas along the border?
You know, ma'am, to be honest, not at all. We anticipated this to go back and forth, a little bit of ping pong, you know, in the courts. But no, we're still doing what we do. You know, we're here to stand side by side with Border Patrol agents as well as Operation Lone Star forces here in Terrell County and make sure we're keeping not only our residents safe, but Texans safe. We'll deal with the other parts of it once it's finally pushed through and ready to put into action.
And Sheriff, we've been hearing from sheriffs along the border, all across the state of Texas. There's been a big disconnect on how they're approaching this. Where do you think that comes from?
You know, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of our sheriffs are just as divided as members of Congress. I'll tell you what, and I have seen some of those statements, and I'll tell you, none of those sheriffs can speak on behalf of Terrell County. Only I will speak on behalf of Terrell County. We do have what's called the Texas Border Sheriffs Coalition, and you know, they represent Texas sheriffs, but I withdrew my membership because I felt like we as sheriffs weren't doing enough along the border. Man, there's some great sheriffs, and I understand sheriffs are gonna you know, take care of their county in different ways, but there are some of us that are out here and willing to do what's necessary.
And Sheriff, I know there's a big discussion amongst law enforcement of the word suspected. You know, it kind of leaves it subjective to each department to try to figure out who a suspected person illegally crossing the border looks like. What is your take on that?
Well, you know, as y'all mentioned, I was a Border Patrol agent for 26 years. I've had that training. It's not something that's going to be difficult to train our state and local law enforcement agents with. And once they get that proper training, they'll be able to you know, use their abilities, use articulable facts to determine who's here legally and illegally and through a line of questioning. But I'll tell you what, again, it's no longer the U.S.-Mexico border. So many people are saying that it's going to be, you know, racial profiling against Mexicans. It's not. And let me tell you even further, it's no longer the U.S.-Mexico border. Every country is exploiting the U.S.-Mexico border to come into the United States. And when I say every country in the world, it's the U.S. world border.
And Sheriff, we've heard from the president of Mexico saying he's not going to allow these people that were going to plan to deport across the border. What does that do to your area and how you approach it?
You know, so and currently even the United States Border Patrol or Department of Homeland Security, when we repatriate or we send people back to their country, we have to send them back to their country of origin. We don't just send them back to Mexico. So yes, he will have to take people from Mexico back to his country, but the others will have to use 287G, which is an authority that comes from the Immigration Nationality Act. It's delegated authority from DHS, and that allows state, local personnel to hold illegal immigrants in their jails until an ICE agent can come out, take custody of that person, and then repatriate them to their country. If we get to that point, look, I can only hold 7 people in my jail. Last year, we had about 70 smugglers we incarcerated. I have agreements with my neighboring jails, neighboring counties to hold people for me. Unfortunately, through Operation Lone Star, those costs were reimbursed by Governor Abbott.
Yeah, Sheriff, I was going to ask you, you mentioned the last time we talked to you, the lack of resources, especially for your county. Is there any conversation of how that would change? Would it become more difficult for you guys to try to enforce SB 4 should it go into effect?
No, ma'am. Enforcing it's going to be what we do on a daily basis. Look, we're here to protect, again, our citizens in Terrell County. And if I think I mentioned to you last time, we don't have a crime problem here in Terrell County. We have a border security problem. So no, enforcing it won't be a problem. It might be a problem, again, incarcerating people here locally. And then, of course, transporting them out, whether it's to Presidio, which is about 3 hours, to repatriate them to Mexico, or over to Del Rio, which is about 2.5 hours. that'll be the part that we have to figure out. And then, of course, the magistration process, there's still some discussions about that.
And Sheriff, you had an encounter recently with a lost migrant that's since gone viral. I wanted to see if you can talk to us about that moment and why you think so many people across the country are sharing that video clip.
Well, what that really showed is humanity mixed in with all the inhumanity we're currently seeing along the border. Hey, I'll tell you what, our Border Patrol agents, now Operation Lone Star Resources, they see that and they do that on a daily basis. Things like this happen daily. It just so happened to be that I was at the right place, the right time, with a journalist that was able to capture that. But I'll tell you what, when you've done this job for almost 30 years, meaning for myself, over 26 years with the Border Patrol, now a few years as sheriff, it's hard. Meaning we see some of the poorest of the poor. It doesn't matter if they're old, young, or in between, men or women. When you see people come to the United States, they're not all bad. I'll leave it like that.
Well, Sheriff, we greatly appreciate your insight and your time with us this morning. Thank you so much for discussing this back and forth with Senate Bill 4 as we continue to wait for things to play out. Thank you again.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you all. God bless. Adios.